Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Midweek Moment. Back in 2012, I was in full-time seminary and close to full-time ministry. Noah was a baby, Caleb was 2 years old, and we also didn't have a lot of money at the time, so Jeff was working overtime hours just to pay the bills, just to get food on the table, and he also had an hour-and-a-half commute to work each way. It was by far one of the most stressful times of our lives. He and I were like two ships passing in the night. And one evening that I'm not particularly proud of, I was at home. It was what parents call the bewitching hour. Noah was crying, Caleb was throwing temper tantrums, I was trying to feed them dinner. I had a major paper due the next day. There were demands in my email box for ministry, and I was completely overwhelmed. It was 6 o'clock, and I was looking for Jeff to pull into the driveway. It got to the point where I just started calling him over and over and over, and he wasn't picking up. Then I started leaving him voicemails. Jeff, where are you? I cannot do this. I need you home right now. Finally, a couple hours later, he got home. He was bone tired, and I snapped. Jeff, where have you been? I'm not particularly proud of that response. That was a really tough season in our life. And quite frankly, one of the things that was missing the most was presence. We rarely had the chance to talk. If we talked, we were at each other's throats. We were complaining about our schedules. We were bone tired, and by the time we got to bed, we fell asleep so quickly. Well, a couple months later, we got one of the best gifts. Jeff had to travel to Malibu, one of the most beautiful places, for work, and it worked out well that I could go with him. And we had just the gift of time together, sitting on the beach together, talking over dinners. And in many ways, we just reignited our love for one another, our connection for one another. And it was exactly what we needed. As we continue our series through the book of Exodus, this last Sunday, one of the things that we talked about is that nothing can replace the gift of presence. And it's incredible to think that the God of all creation is a God of presence that would desire to actually be in relationship and dwell among God's people. In Exodus chapter 25 all the way to chapter 35, God instructs the Israelites to set up the tabernacle so that God might dwell there. In chapter 25, verse 8, God says, "Then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them." And we discover that the Israelites gladly set up the tabernacle because the idea of a God who was present with them was a gift. And we see all throughout Scripture a God who desires to dwell among God's people. And this culminates in the person of King Jesus, who moves into the neighborhood, who is God incarnate among God's people. And in John chapter 15, Jesus says, "Abide in me." And he also asks us to abide in him. As we shared on Sunday, God is a God that is wonderfully, wondrously, palpably, and visibly present. And God also asks us to be wonderfully, wondrously, visibly, and palpably present. And I believe it just takes time. Look at your schedule during the day. Are you carving out intentional time where you aren't doing something else, but really just intentionally being fully, wonderfully, visibly, palpably present with the living God? Perhaps you might start 5 minutes in the morning, opening up the scriptures, reading through the Sermon on the Mount or a prayer journal. God is present with us. Will you be present with God? That's all for this week's Midweek Moment. See you on Sunday.